And welcome into Fantasy Sports today here on Sports Grid. Craig Mish, along with Davis Maddock, we got you covered today as our fantasy football team previews continue with a potential Super Bowl appearance for the Buffalo Bills. We'll talk about that in just a second. Of course, naturally, we have stories to get to here on the show. And Davis, some breaking news here right at the top of the show as Boston Red Sox pitcher Chris Sale injured in a bike accident and broke his wrist, hurt some ribs, and won't pitch for the remainder of the season. 2 years in a row, Sale missing almost the course of a couple of seasons in baseball. So not a great way to start. And boy, the Red Sox not feeling all that good about that contract, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it does just kind of seem that is just the way of life for the Boston Red Sox right now. They sign these guys to massive contracts, and then they either get injured or underperform. And now it kind of puts them in an interesting situation. Like Rafael Devers is going to want to be paid more money soon, and like, what do? Do you give Rafael Devers this massive contract when you're paying Trevor Story all this money, and some of your older veterans, your JD Martinez's are, Martinez's performance has really gone in the tank this far, and you can't really count on, who should theoretically be your best pitcher. Chris Sale is the best pitcher the Red Sox have, but, he's just not been available for an entire season, and they play in the most competitive division in baseball. I mean, even the Orioles are beating up on them now, so I certainly do not envy the decisions that the Red Sox front office are going to have to make over the next couple off seasons.
Yeah, I don't blame them either. Let's get to our headlines here on the show. Besides that, we've got a lot to talk about. Serena Williams, the arguably the greatest women's tennis player of all time. I know that, without a doubt, in the top 2 or 3 for sure. She is retiring, so no more tennis for Serena. Of course, how has a family. Roquan Smith has requested a trade away from the Chicago Bears. Bears appear to be in some big trouble going into the season. Kevin Durant yesterday said it's him or them, meaning if they want him to stay in Brooklyn, the GM and the coach got to go. We'll see which way Brooklyn goes with that. And the Bengals, no longer Paul Brown Stadium, going to change their name to Paycor Stadium, whatever that is. Regardless of that, Davis, we'll get to that here in a second. Let's go back to the NBA here for a minute, and let's get to Kevin Durant. I know that you saw this late yesterday. This seems to me just Kevin Durant trying to find something in order to stir the pot here a little bit. I don't know what their ownership decides to do here. I mean, it seems to be a pretty simple thing. If you want to keep Kevin Durant, this is what you do. But this would be like a game-changing move, like a franchise-altering, a sports-altering move to keep a player over the GM and the coach. I can't see that happening. I don't know about you.
I don't think we've ever publicly had a star do this. Now, of course, LeBron has kind of, put it out through the back channels like, oh, I don't really know. I'm not crazy about working with Mike back in 1981, but he said, I'm not working with this guy anymore. They fired him. They hired Pat Riley, I believe. So it puts the Nets in a hard spot because if you fire Steve Nash and Sean Marks, then you are saying we caved to Kevin Durant. But if you keep them, that ruins your external leverage because everyone knows Kevin Durant doesn't want to be there. So are you getting Jaylen Brown? Are you getting Scotty Barnes? Are you getting Bam Adebayo? Are you getting Donovan Mitchell, for any of the, in any of these trades? Because you have no leverage. Everyone knows exactly what Kevin Durant wants. And what Kevin Durant wants is for those guys to be gone. And it's also pretty, honestly, kind of annoying of him because clearly what happened is Joe Tsai and the Nets organization hand Kevin Durant all this power. And then he says, you know what? I actually don't want to have all this power. I don't really want to be in control of hiring the GM and hiring the coach because I don't like the job these guys are doing. So, it's a very interesting situation in the player empowerment movement.
And by the way, why do you think Kevin Durant is so against the GM and the coach here? Any clue? Like what? I don't. That's what I don't understand.
Well, I think with Steve Nash, it is that they worked together in Golden State, and Kevin Durant liked the time that they spent together there. I think he probably liked the idea of being coached by this NBA legend. And then in practice, maybe they just didn't get along. Maybe they disagreed on the type of offense. Maybe Kevin Durant feels that a better, stronger, more powerful Hall of Fame style coach could control Kyrie Irving a little bit more. If there was a better organizational structure, like if this was the Spurs, right? And it was their front office who's been there for 30 years and Popovich, who's been the coach longer than I've been alive. Kyrie Irving is playing in these games, right? And Durant's not having to go out there and play 40 minutes a night. And maybe he didn't like the way the James Harden trade was orchestrated. Maybe he never wanted Ben Simmons. There's a lot juggling up in the air there. So I'm not exactly sure. But really, my guess would be Durant thought he wanted those guys. And Durant, like, very famously, is just super wishy-washy, right? He's just always changing his mind about what he wants and who he likes and who he doesn't like. And he must have just decided, I don't like these guys.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just so strange, and it almost feels like maybe there's not even a problem with these guys. He's just trying to get out so badly that he needs to just say something to stir the pot. I don't know, but a very compelling story. Maybe this is what picks up over the next couple of weeks for sure. We'll see. NFL preseason is upon us. Week 1, the official week 1, starts on Thursday. Buffalo Bills going to be in action and a potential Super Bowl favorite going into the upcoming season. They have a ton of fantasy expectations, and Davis and I are going to have a preview of the team coming up next. So make sure you stay on the grid with us. This is Fantasy Sports Today. Have you covered until 12 o'clock Eastern. Our Bills preview is on deck. Don't go away.
Great.
If you've been injured in an accident that's not your fault and you don't have an attorney, listen up. We have legal professionals standing by to tell you what your case is potentially worth. Hello, I'm Gina, along with spokesperson Rob. Rob, tell the folks at home who should be calling right now.
Well, just like you said, Gina, anyone who's been injured in an accident that was not your fault, you don't have an attorney, give us a call right now, and we're going to let you know what your case is potentially worth.
Thanks, Rob. So what kind of calls have we been seeing today?
Well, Gina, we're getting calls from all types of accidents today. Work accidents, slip and falls, truck accidents, and most commonly, car accidents. So if you were injured in an accident that was not your fault, you don't have an attorney, take that first step, pick up that phone and give us a call. We're going to answer your questions, and we'll let you know how much money you can get for your accident.
Thanks, Rob. All right, folks at home, you heard it. Go ahead, don't hesitate, take that first step and call now.
Are you over 50? Would you like to get up to 33% more income in retirement? Then call now for this free book, Annuity Do's and Don'ts for Baby Boomers, from a leading financial firm on maximizing your income in retirement. That's right, free. This free book reveals little-known secrets about annuity strategies in simple-to-understand terms that will help you make the right choices before buying an annuity. And it's free. Call right now for your free book, and as a bonus, we'll also throw in a free annuity rate report. We researched over 1,200 annuities and summarized the rates and benefits of annuities from financially strong insurers. Again, that's Annuity Do's and Don'ts for Baby Boomers and a free annuity rate report, both absolutely free, for calling Annuity General today. Supplies are limited. Call now.
Call 800-830-7360. That's 800-830-7360.
Are you over the age of 50 and considering buying an annuity in the next 60 days? I have some important news for you. Don't buy an annuity until you understand the pros and cons of annuities. Call now for this free book on maximizing your income in retirement. Annuity Do's and Don'ts for Baby Boomers, from leading financial firm J.D. Mellberg. That's right, free. This book reveals little-known truths about annuities in simple-to-understand terms. Grab a pen right now, because we're about to offer you this free book that unlocks the 5 little-known truths we believe baby boomers and seniors should know before buying an annuity, and it's free. Call 800-273-2815. As a bonus, we'll also throw in a free annuity rate report. We researched numerous products and summarized rates and benefits of annuities, all from Silac Insurance Company. Call 800-273-2815. That's 800-273-2815. Call now.
Great.
And welcome back to Fantasy Sports Today here on Sports Grid. All right, so after going through a few teams, we've now reached the point where we get to a real legitimate Super Bowl contender here in the Buffalo Bills, Davis. And naturally, when you look at the season that they had last year, coming within a play or two maybe from potentially getting to the Super Bowl, of course, overtime, the rules have changed now, so naturally that could change the dynamic with them with the way that they play. But there are a lot of options here, and a lot of people are going to want the top options here in fantasy, Davis, for sure. And we're going to dive even deeper. We should probably even get into some backup options, because as long as Josh Allen is there, and as long as they have their head coach intact here, and certainly running the things the way that they did last year, there's going to be a lot of fantasy points to go around here this season with them.
Yeah, they do have a new offensive coordinator. Brian Daboll leaves to become head coach of the New York Giants. They also have a new general manager, same deal. Basically half of the Bills coaching staff just left and went to go be members of the New York Giants. I actually think the Bills are completely fascinating for fantasy football, however, because we don't really know outside of Stephon Diggs what the offense is going to look like. They signed Isaiah McKenzie to a contract extension in the offseason. They signed Jamison Crowder to a free agency deal, and they drafted Khalil Shakir in the 4th round of the NFL draft. They let Matt Breida go. Matt Breida, another one of those former Bills players who went to go be a member of the New York Giants. They drafted James Cook in the 2nd round of the NFL draft, and they didn't really do any replacement tight end behind Dawson Knox, who was amongst the league leaders in snaps played at tight end last season, scored 9 touchdowns. But I think that, really it's kind of fascinating. The Bills are certainly within the favorites, or like top 3 favorites to score the most points in the NFL and to throw the most passes, but they only have 3 players going inside the top 100 picks. Those are Stephon Diggs, who is a 1st round pick, Gabriel Davis, who is a 4th round pick, and Josh Allen, who is a 3rd round pick. And then the market is kind of just throwing up their hands and saying, we don't know who's coming after that.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating stuff. And unless one injury could completely change the landscape of the Bills and their ADP, they have several players being drafted in the top 100. So let's go through it. Josh Allen is a very clear-cut 2nd, 3rd round pick in fantasy football in 12-team leagues. Devin Singletary, quite a bump this year. His ADP is 74. They drafted James Cook, the brother of Dalvin Cook. His ADP is 112. Stephon Diggs just outside the 1st round. Gabriel Davis just outside the 5th, 6th round. And then Dawson Knox, essentially an 8th round or 9th round pick at tight end. So Davis, a ton of possibilities here. And looking at this, I mean, naturally there are going to be some players who are just going to go way above. But let's start off with the quarterback in terms of where Josh Allen is drafted. Where do you see him sort of this season? Do you think there's a chance that he gives the ball more to the running backs at the goal line, like we saw a little bit in the playoffs, or do they just kind of hoist him into an MVP type season, which he certainly could have?
Yeah, I mean, Allen is pretty interesting. He actually, this is true, last season was the best year of his career in terms of, wins, losses, and everything. But it was the most yards per carry he's ever averaged. In fact, he led the NFL in yards per carry last year, but only scored 6 rushing touchdowns. So there was a little bit more Zach Moss, a little bit more Matt Breida, a little bit more Devin Singletary, particularly at the end of the year. I think probably the big question is, are they going to be a little bit more conservative because they have sort of these untested guys in Gabe Davis, Khalil Shakir, Isaiah McKenzie, and then I guess Jamison Crowder is not untested, but maybe not that good. For my money, I prefer the 2 quarterbacks going directly behind Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes to him at ADP. I think those guys are better bets. But, obviously, Josh Allen is a great fantasy asset. He's a great player, is very likely going to be an MVP consideration. I mean, the thing you would always worry about with him, I mean, he was good last year, but he did throw 15 interceptions, right? That is a lot of interceptions for an elite quarterback. And you do wonder if he still has some of that 1st and 2nd year jitters in him, where he always is trying to extend these plays. And, sometimes that means that things can go south.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's take a closer look here at obviously they have a ton of players, I think, that are going to provide some value here. Singletary is interesting for me because I think, Davis, if you kind of go through the first few weeks of last year in the NFL season, he was sort of being written off. It was like, all right, I guess it's just not going to happen for him. But he closed off very strong, and he had 870 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns. And he finished basically as a top 30 running back last season. His ADP is 74, so he's being drafted like a 6th-round pick. But the Bills did not stop at Singletary, and they drafted a guy that we're going to talk about in a few minutes in James Cook. So, I mean, is it a hot hand type situation? I'm very hesitant going into a season with Singletary as my RB2. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's like there's so many different outcomes from this.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are all pretty cheap. On some of the best ball sites, you can get Singletaries like a 9th or 10th round pick. And in fact, in some of these places, James Cook is going ahead of him. The reason why we are excited about Devin Singletary, he played every single snap in the Chiefs playoff game, 100% of the offensive snaps for the Bills. He played 86% in the win against New England. And then he ended out the season with 6 touchdowns over his final 4 games, was working as the passing down back, was working as the goal line back, really just and Devin Singletary is not a special player. I'm not really certain that James Cook is a special player either, though. I think they are both just kind of guys who are going to be able to get the job done at the NFL level. And I actually prefer Singletary right now at the cost that these guys have right now, because I would anticipate he is going to start the year 60, 70% of the snaps probably, and we'll see what happens behind that. But James Cook is going to have to earn his snaps effectively, and I'm not certain that he will.
Yeah, and I think that that's really the key. And when you look at Cook and the season that he had last year at Georgia, he was also, Davis, sort of a late emerging star where he really, had to share carries with other running backs there as a Bulldog. And then toward the end of the season and into the SEC championship and college football playoffs, all of a sudden people started looking at him and saying, wait a second, maybe we're missing something over the last few years. So I can understand why people are taking Cook over Singletary, but I think you made the point. If the playoffs mean anything, then Singletary is going to be the guy. But I mean, it seems like so many different outcomes will come. Like if it feels to me like Cook is going to win a week for you, and then he may not play for a few weeks. And that's my concern there. I'm just not sure what to expect.
Yeah. And I mean, James Cook never got over 115 carries in college. He did have 27 receptions his final season and 113 carries, but he was a 4-year prospect at Georgia, played behind Zamir White, who was a 4th-round pick, played behind, lots of guys at Georgia, right? Georgia feels like they have an NFL running back coming out every single year. And Singletary was kind of the opposite. Singletary was a stone-cold workhorse in college, and Singletary is never... I think it's fair to say he's never really been disappointing in the NFL. Like, you can't ever point to a period where you were like, yeah, Singletary just can't play. He's way worse than running back X, Y, or Z. It's just that when you watch Singletary get the ball, you're never like, oh, this guy's really explosive. This guy really adds something. It's more that he just, kind of gets what's blocked, is reliable, he's decent in pass protection. And that'll be something that James Cook is asked to do, is be effective in pass protection. And I think it remains to be seen if he can be effective at that. And there's also been some rumors that Zach Moss is going to come back from being a healthy scratch to being involved again. And if that happens, I mean, that'll be a huge headache for both of these guys.
Yeah, it definitely will. But lots to like about Buffalo and their offense going into the season. We're far from done talking about them. We've got their wide receivers to go through. And one of their wide receivers in particular is probably the hottest name in fantasy football going into the season. If you look at a player that, could really outperform average draft position, we'll hit on that next. So stay on the grid for that. Also, we'll talk about their tight ends, and we'll close out our discussion. And if you miss any of our preview of the Buffalo Bills here, make sure you catch it over on our YouTube channel or over on sportsgrid.com. We'll be right back.
Great.
Hi, folks. Medicare Part C plans with extra benefits like getting money added back to your Social Security check may now be available to you in your zip code. Make sure you're not missing out. It's simple. 1, call the number on your screen. 2, they'll look up your zip code and see if you're eligible. 3, they'll check for plans with extra benefits like prescriptions, dental coverage, and the benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every single month. Call now.
I called to get everything I deserve.
I called to check my zip code for a plan with a benefit that adds money back to my Social Security check.
I called to check my zip code.
Millions of people have called the Medicare Coverage Helpline. Call, check your zip code, see if you're eligible, and get what you deserve. Call now.
Call 1-800-810-7576. That's 1-800-810-7576 now.
Funerals can be emotionally devastating for a family to go through. Besides the sorrow, loved ones are left with the high cost of arranging a funeral. Funeral Advantage was formed to help protect your family when they need it most. It pays your loved ones up to $20,000 immediately for funeral and any other expenses.
It's a good feeling to know that my family will be taken care of if anything happens to me.
Funerals can easily cost $9,000 or more, but government benefits pay only $255, leaving your loved ones to pay the rest.
It's so easy, just answer a few simple health questions. This is so affordable, even for someone like me who's on a fixed income.
If you're 40 to 85, get information on how to protect your family. Funeral Advantage is something we all need. There's no risk or obligation. Call now.
Get the facts about how easy it is to protect your family. Call 800-565-6178. That's 800-565-6178.
I'm calling in regards about my mother, and I'm here, and I just want to thank you because it saved my mother's life yesterday, and I'd like to know the names of the people that came in and saved her. It's a wonderful thing. Thank you.
With Life Alert, one touch of a button can get you help fast.
For a free Life Alert brochure, call 1-800-450-0515. 1-800-450-0515.
Attention! Do you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS? If so, you may qualify for the IRS Fresh Start program, so you won't have to make any payments to the IRS. That's right. If you qualify for the IRS's Fresh Start program, you won't make any IRS payments once you are accepted. Once you are in the IRS Fresh Start program, they must stop all harassing and threatening collection activities. Call Tax Relief today now at 800-382-1870 to see if you qualify. Again, 800-382-1870.
We continue our preview of the Buffalo Bills from a fantasy perspective here in 2022 with a lot of fantasy football drafts on the way. We'll give you some opinions as to the average draft position in the NFFC, the National Fantasy Football Championships, and where you should be taking the Bills in your draft this season. Again, let's go through their average draft position in case you missed it. Josh Allen's ADP is 24, the quarterback of the Bills, and then we have two running backs, Singletary at 74, James Cook at 112. Now, the wide receiver, Stephon Diggs, just outside the first round at 14. Gabriel Davis, approximately a sixth-round pick at 71. And Dawson Knox somewhere in the middle in terms of tight ends. His ADP is the 8th or 9th round. So now let's move on to Allen's weapons. And so naturally, Davis, if he's going to throw 30 to 40 touchdowns bare minimum, there's a lot to like going into the season. And Stephon Diggs last year had another fantastic season, 1,200 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns, top 10 tight end in fantasy football. And really, since he's left Minnesota, he's been fantastic with Allen. And yet there still are some that think, maybe there's a year eventually where this falls off. I don't know that this year is the year for him, but he certainly has really had a resurgence in Buffalo.
Yeah, it was 2 seasons ago, 2020. Diggs led the NFL in receptions, led the NFL in yards, scored 8 touchdowns. He had another great season last year, 164 targets, 103 receptions, and is pretty clearly, I think, the fourth best wide receiver in fantasy. Don't really see an argument for him going ahead of Kupp, Chase, or Jefferson, but have no issue with him going in the first round as the wide receiver 4. I don't really think there's all that much interesting to talk about with him. He's a great first round pick. If you draw the 7th pick or the 8th pick, you take Diggs, you move on. That's totally fine. But outside of Diggs, I mean, we have a huge change in how this roster has been configured the last few years. Cole Beasley is gone. Emmanuel Sanders is gone. And they bring in, some new guys, and we don't really have a sense of what the distribution of targets is going to look like, because every year that Josh Allen has been good, they brought in a different veteran wide receiver, right? Sanders, John Brown, right? And now there's none of that. And now it's going to be, can Gabriel Davis step up? Is Isaiah McKenzie the slot guy? Is Jamison Crowder the slot guy? Is Khalil Shakir going to play? Are they going to play 2 tight ends? Like, what are they going to do? It's kind of a riddle, which is sort of fun to solve.
Yeah, and that's really the dynamic, that getting that second piece of the Buffalo Bills offense, as Davis mentioned. I mean, Cole Beasley was a major contributor to that team, and a couple of years ago, John Brown was a major contributor to the Buffalo Bills too. So everyone in the fantasy football community, Davis, seems to be pointing toward Gabriel Davis as maybe the single biggest chance for a big hit, a Metcalf type hit from 2 years ago, a Deebo Samuel type hit from last year. And Davis has been quiet at the beginning of seasons and has come on at the end. We saw that in the playoffs 2 years ago. We saw it at the end of last season in the playoffs as well. And naturally, he still is not being drafted essentially as a wide receiver 1 or a wide receiver 2. And that's, I think that's kind of fair because you really don't know. But if he simply hits on double the projection that he had last year, you're talking about over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns, which puts him squarely in the conversation for a second-round pick in fantasy football in 2023. The question is, does he do it? And more or less, in your opinion, with the helium that he's had, how many of Gabriel Davis do you have on these best ball teams that you've drafted?
Well, in these best ball drafts, he is considerably more expensive. You do have to take him in the 4th round. But I think he is a great selection in the 4th round because I think clearly when you look at the organizational decision-making, it all leads to them thinking Gabriel Davis is our guy. So they let Emmanuel Sanders go. They let John Brown go. And if they would do what they did in the past off seasons, they would be bringing in another veteran wide receiver to play on the outside, but they have not done that, right? They didn't sign Julio Jones. They didn't, they haven't reached out to Will Fuller. Any of these guys, there's no rumors that Odell Beckham, although Khalil Mack or Von Miller is trying to get Odell Beckham to come play with him in Buffalo. We'll see about that. But clearly, I think the organization believes in Gabriel Davis, and he has been so efficient in his career. 125 regular season targets, 13 touchdowns, of course, 24 targets in the postseason in his career, 5 touchdowns with 4 of them coming against the Kansas City Chiefs. I think Gabriel Davis is a phenomenal player. I think he is the exact type of guy. Feels very that year 3 Chris Godwin, when the old, Mike Evans is getting a little bit older, Vincent Jackson leaves, and Chris Godwin had never really done anything in his career, but all of a sudden is a 4th round pick and paid off that tag, no problem. That's how I feel about Gabriel Davis.
Yeah, I do too. And again, he is somebody that I'm going to be targeting this coming season. I'm sure like everybody else as well. Let's get to tight end and then talk about some of the non-top 150 type players. Dawson Knox last season was a red zone machine, Davis. He had 9 touchdowns and 587 receiving yards. He's basically being drafted as the 10th tight end or the 9th tight end in fantasy football. He's a top 100 player. But that it's hard to sustain the touchdown numbers, right? Like that's the hard thing to project. Like if you just told me he had 8 or 7, I think he's being drafted exactly where he should. But you just never know with this stuff. But boy, if I close my eyes, Davis, and picture Dawson Knox, you know what it is. Back of the end zone, Allen's running around, throws it up in the air, and that's the guy that always seems to come down with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the biggest argument for liking Dawson Knox in fantasy is he played 86% of the team snaps on offense last year. That is a Travis Kelce number. Not Kittle, Waller. These guys are like 75, 80%. I mean, there were multiple games last season where Dawson Knox played 100% of the team snaps, literally did not come off the field, goal line packages, third and long, doesn't matter. He's out there. And, if you look at their roster this year, Diggs and Gabe Davis are going to play on the outside. And then you have Jamison Crowder, who is, fairly injury prone. Isaiah McKenzie, who is like an interesting player, ended the season super strong. They use him on like some gadget stuff, but no way Isaiah McKenzie is going to be a full-time player. Khalil Shakir, Jake Kumaro, just some of these guys. Like, I don't really see how Knox is coming off the field. Now, they did sign O.J. Howard to a 1-year, $5 million deal in free agency. And O.J. Howard has kind of been one of those guys in fantasy football. We've been chasing the dragon with him forever. We've been waiting for O.J. Howard to become a thing, and he never really has. And maybe O.J. Howard will take Dawson Knox from being a 85-90% snap share guy to a 70-75% snap share guy. And when you are a player like Dawson Knox, who is good but not great, and who relies on volume to accumulate fantasy numbers and not efficiency, that could make him in a situation where maybe you don't love him. Now, the price feels pretty appropriate. For example, he is, goes around pick 90, pick 100, the 9th, 10th tight end off the board. Like, I would rather have him at that cost than Dalton Schultz at the 70th or 75th pick as the tight end 6. Maybe even would prefer him to Hawkinson, who goes 10, 15 picks before. But I don't think you're doing cartwheels to select Dawson Knox. He seems mostly fine. Not someone I'm going in a draft saying, like, I got to get that guy, though.
Right. Makes sense. The first few tight ends go off the board, and then he becomes a consideration if you don't get one of the top guys at the beginning. All right, so let's close it out with this conversation. Naturally, late round picks, you want to just grab a piece of a good offense. I mean, that's really what it is, because if something happens, you may end up striking gold. So you mentioned McKenzie. I mean, is Moss a possibility for you? 16th round, 15th round? Are there any other players that we should just be looking at, stashing and hoping? Or is it just simply come down to injury? Because I want a player that I think could actually play rather than having to wait. That's part of it, I think.
Josh Allen has done a really good job making slot wide receivers good in this offense. Cole Beasley 2 years ago finished as a top 25 fantasy wide receiver in this offense, right? And Stephon Diggs did some of his best work out of the slot. And the early reports from Buffalo Bills training camp are that Isaiah McKenzie is winning that slot role over Jamison Crowder, which makes sense because the Jamison Crowder contract is really small. He only is getting about $2 million per year, and he's got a little bit extra in incentives, if he gets to a threshold of like games played or anything like that. And McKenzie, I suppose, is just sort of interesting because of how strong he ended the season last year. If we remember, he had to play in Week 15 against New England because of injuries. He had 12 targets, 11 receptions, 125 yards, and scored a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown as well. And, him and Crowder are both veterans. They've been hanging around the NFL for a while. And Khalil Shakir, the rookie out of Boise State, has also been getting some good reviews out of camp. But if any of Jamison Crowder, McKenzie, or Shakir just clearly wins that slot wide receiver job, that is going to be a guy worth owning in 12-team fantasy leagues. And my guess is that in most, home leagues, you have 15 roster spots, 12 teams. Those guys are not going to get drafted. But my guess is that one of those guys is going to end up being a very strong option in fantasy at some point.
Yeah, you're right, because the PPR formats, again, whoever the slot guy is, it's 4 catches, 50 yards, maybe a touchdown from any of those. And then the other thing that we should probably mention, Davis, before we close this out is, and I know it's not a popular conversation to have, we won't have it with every team, but this is a team where you want the kicker, right? And this is a team where you may want the defense too. And I think that's part of it as well.
You definitely like the defense. The kicker you want for road games, but once it gets to be November and December in Buffalo, I don't know if you'll want the kicker as much. I mean, we always want the kicker in the dome when it comes to fantasy football playoff time.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, we'll take a quick timeout here on Fantasy Sports Today. That's our review of the Buffalo Bills. So make sure you catch us tomorrow. We will take a look at the Carolina Panthers in 2022 and just exactly where Christian McCaffrey should be getting drafted as our previews continue here on the show. We have Fantasy and Reality next, so stay on the group.
Great.
You heard a screech outside at night, but you can't see what it is because there's not enough light. You need the Bionic Floodlight from Bell & Howell, the solar-powered, motion-activated, multi-directional floodlight, the versatile wireless, safety, security, and outdoor lifestyle light you'll love. And right now, it's yours for just $29.99, and the shipping is free. Order now, and we'll send a second Bionic Floodlight. Just pay a separate fee. Here's how to order.
Call 1-800-604-7066 or order online at bionicfloodlight.com.
If you or a loved one has mesothelioma or any other asbestos-related cancer, call now. Asbestos manufacturers sold deadly asbestos materials to thousands of companies, putting workers at risk. An estimated $30 billion in court-ordered trusts have been set aside to pay out claims to asbestos victims. You may be entitled to a portion of these funds and receive compensation without filing a lawsuit or ever going to court.
For your free legal consultation, call 800-268-1371. That's 800-268-1371. I'm a non-attorney spokesperson.
I lost my motivation. I was feeling old and starting to look it. And then, voila, I feel better than I did in my 20s. If you feel stuck and you can't find the drive, it may be due to low HGH, which naturally drops with age.
Your growth hormone levels start declining in your 20s, but GF9's lab-tested, patented formula is designed to boost GH levels naturally by up to 682%. Growth hormone is associated with reduced body fat, increased lean muscle, improved energy, mood, and more. And best of all, GF9 has been shown to work in as little as 2 hours.
I've taken a million different supplements. This is the first one that I've noticed has made a tremendous difference.
To me, GF9 is the best supplement out on the market.
GF9 is a top-selling male performance product at GNC. Call right now to try GF9 for 60 days absolutely risk-free.
Call 1-800-795-9129 or go to getgf9.com.
Join us. Get your drive back, get your youth back, and get back in the game with GF9.
Here's an important message from the Diabetes Solution Center. Diabetics understand all too well the pain of pricking your fingers. But now, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can immediately reduce your pain. It's easy to use and helps you make more accurate diabetes treatment decisions. If you are testing your blood sugar 4 or more times daily, injecting insulin 3 or more times daily, or using an insulin pump, call the Diabetes Solution Center right now.
Attention! Do you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS? If so, you may qualify for the IRS Fresh Start program, so you won't have to make any payments to the IRS. That's right. If you qualify for the IRS's Fresh Start program, you won't make any IRS payments once you are accepted. Once you are in the IRS Fresh Start program, they must stop all harassing and threatening collection activities. Call Tax Relief today now at 800-382-1870 to see if you qualify. Again, 800-382-1870.
And welcome back to Fantasy Sports Today here on Sports Grid. Are you following us on social media? If not, you should. Here's how you do it. Go to Twitter, follow us at Sports Grid and at Sports Grid TV for the latest news, notes, information, any fantasy football content you could ask for. We're delivering it to you, as well as all of our hosts making picks, predictions for the upcoming 2022 NFL and college football seasons right here. And Davis, we're just a few weeks away, by the way, from college football starting. In fact, next week we can start doing our previews of that. But, you know, naturally everyone has eyes on the NFL preseason coming up on Thursday.
Yeah, the NFL preseason, we're going to get a chance, I think, to see some real offenses. I think the New York Giants, we just got done talking about the Bills. The New York Giants took about half their coaching staff are going to be running the Bills offense. I think we're going to see Daniel Jones. I think we're going to see Wandale. I think we might even get to see a little bit of Saquon or Kenny Galladay, because they got to see some live fire. They are not trying to tank this season for sure. I mean, this is a winnable division. The NFC East is terrible. So I think we're going to get to see some of that. And I'm excited to see some of these rookies get out there and play, and also just, kind of learn what the organizational hierarchy is at running back for some of these teams as well.
Yeah, for sure. Thursday night, NFL preseason week 1 begins. College football 2 weeks from Saturday, starting up once again in the upcoming season. All right, time for some fantasy or reality. Okay, Davis, we talked a lot about the Buffalo Bills here on the show. Naturally, one of the ways that Josh Allen has emerged as one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in fantasy football is his ability to run. Clearly, one of the best at it in the game. Naturally, to lead the league in rushing at the quarterback position, he's got some pretty stiff competition. He's got Kyler Murray, who last year at the beginning of the season looked like he was going to do it and then obviously slowed down. Lamar Jackson could have done it. He had some issues staying on the field as well. And there are other quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes and some others, who can run for sure. But Allen definitely has made his name off this. Let's go into the upcoming season, and I will ask you, fantasy or reality, Josh Allen will finish with the most rushing yards among all NFL quarterbacks. Trey Lance, probably another one I should mention too.
Yeah, I got clear fantasy here. Josh Allen did not lead quarterbacks in rushing yards last year. That was Jalen Hurts, who actually missed 2 games. Didn't have to play Week 17 because the Eagles had the playoff spot locked up, and then missed 1 game with injury as well. Remember Gardner Minshew winning against the Jets and started that quarterback controversy. But Jalen Hurts ran 139 times for 784 yards. Lamar actually beat Josh Allen in rushing yards despite only playing in 11 and a half games. He left 1 game early with that ankle injury that kept him out for over a month of the season. Then Allen had 763 yards in 17 games. Probably the more interesting thing, though, is that Justin Fields in only 10 games got to 450, and Trey Lance had over 150 in 2 games. So I just think there's no way. I would rank this Lamar first, then Lance, then Hurts, then Allen in terms of probability to lead quarterbacks in rushing yards.
Yeah, I'm in agreement here. I think it's fantasy. Now, if you told me a couple of those guys got hurt, I think that could change the equation. And Allen has been really healthy over the last few years too. But I'll go fantasy, and I'll also say this. Look, when first-year quarterbacks in the NFL, we've seen it through the years, they tend to run a lot and then sort of slow that down in the past. Steve Young was like that in his first year in San Francisco. I could go back to Randall Cunningham. I could go to Michael Vick. I mean, you just keep going down the line, and all of a sudden they learn that in order to win games, you got to throw the ball. It didn't happen for Vince Young per se, and I don't know that it'll happen for Trey Lance, but that would be my pick, would be Lance or Fields. One of those 2 guys, they're going to have a really hard time throwing bombs and scoring touchdowns in the offenses that they play in, but they will not have a hard time just taking the ball and running. Also, I don't want to discount Trevor Lawrence from running a little bit more too this year. But I will go fantasy with you, although I will say in terms of health, Allen has definitely proven himself, and he's going to be in the conversation for sure at the end of the 2022 season. All right, let's go to draft strategy in fantasy. Some people have to make a decision on this in the next couple of weeks as well. Running back dynamic, we've heard so much about drafting 0 running backs, going all in on running backs, and the first 3 picks of your fantasy draft, especially if you're playing with a flex position, you could conceivably choose to just go all in on running back. So Davis, let's ask that next question. Fantasy reality. It's a good strategy in fantasy football this season to draft 3 running backs in the first 3 rounds this upcoming season.
Yeah, definite fantasy here. You are going to be way behind the 8 ball of your opponents at wide receiver if you do this. Now, if the question is, should you take at least 1? I think that answer would be reality. You know, I think that the quality at running back really drops off for me after Alvin Kamara goes off the board. His ADP right now is right around that 2-3 turn. Once you go from him to Javonte Williams, Nick Chubb, James Conner, you know, guys like that, I think there is a pretty significant drop off. But if you get to that point of your draft, and let's say you start Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift, and James Conner, right? Then your first wide receiver is Gabe Davis, Jerry Jeudy, Chris Godwin. You just skipped out on all the elite tight ends. You are, and then if you want to take a running quarterback, then your wide receiver 2 is going to be Hunter Renfrow. You know, I mean, it's really bad if you do that. So I just think you're handcuffing yourself too much. Remember, the least important spot of your lineup in a managed league in fantasy football where you are setting the lineup every single week is your running back 2, right? I mean, you can get away with James White, Nyheim Hines, whoever at your running back 2 slot. So I got fantasy here.
Yeah, I'm on the same side here. It's not close. Once again, 2 for 2. I generally speaking, in the last few years, and having pretty good success at doing this, although I don't play nearly as much as you do, Davis. But generally speaking, out of my first four picks, it's usually one running back, and then I'm piecing
Yeah.
together the second, and it drives you crazy. But listen, if you're playing and you're playing for decent stakes, and your entry fee is a few $100s, then to me, that's where you leave the RB2 out. Now, look, if it's $10, $20, who cares? Just do whatever you want. Put two running backs in there. But I am in it, and I'm in it to use the fab budget, and I'm in it to play the the percentages and find the right guys to play every week and going crazy trying to figure that out. Yeah, I mean that's what we do. So I'm okay with that as long as it's not Ronald Jones. I'm very comfortable with that going into the season because that did not work out for me last year. So no way. Three running backs, forget it. I may not have three running backs after 6 or 7 picks. All right, let's move on to the NBA, where I think it's fair to say, Davis, that even with this Kevin Durant news that we got yesterday here that we're talking about now, it has been a mild NBA offseason for the first time in a while. Not a ton of drama. Even James Harden decided to go back to the team that he was on, which I did not expect. But naturally, this could be expanded a little bit if you chose, and that's what the question that we're going to ask here as we close Fantasy or Reality out today. The NBA should turn the offseason, all the drama, into a reality show. So essentially like a Hard Knocks for the NBA offseason. And it's an interesting question because if you think about it, the last few years, this would have been must-see TV. And this year, would anybody care?
Yeah, I mean, you need to get good access, obviously. Like, you'd have to have Kevin Durant signing off to letting a TV crew follow him around, and Donovan Mitchell would have to sign off of it, and you'd have to have cameras in the Timberwolves front office as they're making the trade for Rudy Gobert. I think there are two reasons why this offseason has been a little bit quieter than expected. The first is the Timberwolves ruined the market for everyone. They gave up the equivalent of 7 first-round picks for Rudy Gobert, who is probably not a top 15 player in the NBA. For example, his teammate Donovan Mitchell is probably a better player than him. So if the price for acquiring Rudy Gobert is 4 good young players and 7 first-round picks, what is the price for Kevin Durant? What is the price for Jaylen Brown? What is the price? You know, it's like you can't even enter that into a conversion chart for Kevin Durant. You'd have to trade away your whole organization, and it just makes no sense. So I think that's part of it. And then the other part is all of these teams are just waiting to see what happens with Kevin Durant before the fireworks fly. Because imagine you're sitting there in the Phoenix Suns, and I mean, they kind of got screwed by the DeAndre Ayton offer sheet thing. But imagine you're the Phoenix Suns, and you're like, you know what? We are going to trade for, some wing player, right? And then 3 days later, the Nets call you and they say, actually, like, we're willing to deal now, but you can't deal anymore because your contract situation doesn't allow you to. So until Kevin Durant decides on what to do, nothing is going to happen. But I got reality here. If this was a well-produced show with full access, I would watch it.
Yeah, I have fantasy just because, again, the unpredictability of what an off season can be. And listen, I understand the point that you're saying with access, but like the driving force of this, if it was this year, if it was this off season, it would still be boring because the Kevin Durant stuff. What would they have shown the last couple of weeks? Nothing. Him just sitting around. Look, a lot of the reality sports stuff has been fantastically produced. You would even have to admit that Hard Knocks has lost a little bit of its luster the last few years just because it's kind of run its course a little bit. That's not to say that this year's episode won't be good because it could potentially be that. They even tried to expand it into the in-season version with the Indianapolis Colts. When was that interesting for them? Only when they lost at the end of last season and totally fell apart. Other than that, was it all that compelling? Probably not. We like new things. We like to try new things, and they certainly could do this, but there's no guarantee of this being interesting if it's an off season like this year. If it's a LeBron off season or some other player that's potentially going or getting traded, then I think you go through that process. But I definitely
I think you might be cutting this off season a little short. You know, imagine an episode where we get to see the meeting where Russell Westbrook fires his agent, or the meeting where Kevin Durant tells Joe Tsai he wants to be traded, and the meeting where Danny Ainge tells Donovan Mitchell we're trading all of our good players, and you got to figure it out. And the Knicks meeting with Jalen Brunson, like I think you're cutting it a little short. I think they're. I mean, Dejounte Murray got traded for 3 first-round picks. The Spurs never do that. Like, when's the last time the Spurs were involved in a blockbuster trade? I think you're cutting this NBA offseason a little short.
Listen, if it's a 1-hour show, I think you're right. If it's 2 1-hour shows, I think you're right.
It's a better documentary. It's a better documentary than show.
I mean, an every week thing. I don't see that being sustainable. I personally don't. But again, listen, a different audience for me for sure. That's just sort of the way. At least for me, that's kind of the way that I see it, no doubt. But it will be interesting though to see, because the season is coming pretty fast. And when you think about it, we have, let's see, it's August, so 2 months away from like real preseason games and training camps again. And then we're full force. Davis back with football and basketball, and then baseball postseason. That's kind of upon us too.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are. This is kind of in the mellow period. August is pretty mellow, but when we get to like late September, it's like, Craig, we're not gonna have time to sleep. We got NFL, we got college football. It's like it gets absolutely insane. The fall and winter months, it's just like there's too much going on.
Yeah, we're almost there. All right, we're also almost at the end of our show today, so make sure you stay on the grid, because coming up next is time for the Sports Grid 60. Davis and I will deliver our final thought here on the show, and then I'll be right back with you at 2 o'clock Eastern for Newswire. So make sure you stay on the grid for that. Also, don't forget, Scott Farrell coming up 3 o'clock Eastern today, going coast to coast. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Great.
Non-attorney spokesperson. This is a paid advertisement for legal services sponsored by Nightline Legal. Cases assigned on a random basis to participating law firms. Attention parents. If your child was born premature and later diagnosed with necrotizing enterocolitis, also known as NEC, call right now. You may be entitled to financial compensation. Certain types of baby formulas have been linked to an increased risk of newborns developing NEC, a severe and potentially fatal intestinal illness that oftentimes requires surgery. If your child was born premature or at a low birth weight and later diagnosed with necrotizing enterocolitis, the baby formula your child was fed may be to blame, and you may be entitled to significant compensation from the manufacturer. Call right now to find out if you qualify. Don't be a victim. Get the help you deserve. There are time deadlines to file a claim, so don't wait. Call right now.
Call 1-800-958-5083. That's 1-800-958-5083.
Are you over the age of 50 and considering buying an annuity in the next 60 days? I have some important news for you. Don't buy an annuity until you understand the pros and cons of annuities. Call now for this free book on maximizing your income in retirement. Annuity Do's and Don'ts for Baby Boomers, from leading financial firm J.D. Mellberg. That's right, free. This book reveals little-known truths about annuities in simple-to-understand terms. Grab a pen right now, because we're about to offer you this free book that unlocks the 5 little-known truths we believe baby boomers and seniors should know before buying an annuity, and it's free. Call 800-273-2815. As a bonus, we'll also throw in a free annuity rate report. We researched numerous products and summarized rates and benefits of annuities, all from Silac Insurance Company. Call 800-273-2815. That's 800-273-2815. Call now.
Hi, folks. Medicare Part C plans with extra benefits like getting money added back to your Social Security check may now be available to you in your zip code. Make sure you're not missing out. It's simple. 1, call the number on your screen. 2, they'll look up your zip code and see if you're eligible. 3, they'll check for plans with extra benefits like prescriptions, dental coverage, and the benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every single month. Call now.
I called to get everything I deserve.
I called to check my zip code for a plan with a benefit that adds money back to my Social Security check.
I called to check my zip code.
Millions of people have called the Medicare Coverage Helpline. Call, Check your zip code, see if you're eligible, and get what you deserve. Call now.
Call 1-800-810-7576. That's 1-800-810-7576 now.
All right, before we get out of here and turn it over to Kevin and Donnie in the early line coming up, just a reminder, you can catch us back here live, 2 o'clock Eastern, for another edition of Newswire. I'll be back with you here on the show, catching up with everything happening in the NFL and, of course, Major League Baseball. Let's turn it over to Davis and the Sports Grid 60.
So I've been working through, obviously, some data from last season in terms of like roster construction and just kind of trying to, we're at that time of the year where we're just kind of trying to remember what happened during the last fantasy football season to help us with our drafts right now. And do you remember that like 3-week period where everyone was out with COVID? It just felt like everyone was testing, coaches were testing positive, assistants, players, linemen. Boy, do I hope that doesn't happen this year. Because that really stunk. Like your whole fantasy season got derailed, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, no one was testing positive for COVID in the playoffs. Obviously, they fixed that, but I just really hope that basically that gets figured out, because I'm just going to be so mad if we're going into these final weeks of the fantasy football playoffs and I'm missing Gabe Davis because he tested positive for COVID.
Yeah, that's definitely the equation that nobody wants to see happen again, for sure. All right, we're basically at wacky season in Major League Baseball here, and look at the amount of money that Chris Sale is being paid by the Boston Red Sox to not pitch. Yesterday, we also found out that look at the amount of money that Jason Hayward is going to make for the Chicago Cubs next season, $22 million to not play. I mean, look, we're approaching the end of the baseball season, and naturally teams are making decisions on their futures. And think if I would have told you that Chris Sale would not be pitching for the Red Sox in critical times, and even when they signed Hayward to a $184 million extension, if I would have told you that he would finish his season in a way that he did not expect. That's kind of where we're at in baseball as we head toward the postseason in October. That'll do it for the show. Thanks, of course, to LTN and, of course, our graphics department. For our producer, Andrew, today, and my co-host, Davis Maddock, I'm Craig Mish. See you at 2 o'clock Eastern.